Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping back into Jed MacKay's Moon Knight, and with this one we get a couple of passive explanations to the current state of the mind of Marc Spector, and he clears up a few things early on into the series. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping back in, we head back over to the Midnight Mission, and when we do, we pick up with another conversation between Marc and Rhys, to where this time around we see her responding to Marc asking about how her parents feel about her whole situation, with her being a vampire now, and with her response telling him that they're about as happy with her being a vampire as they are about her working with a guy who runs around in a white hood. And off that alone, you can already tell what her parents think of Moon Knight, which is hilarious. But then also while they're here, they make mention that for the past few nights, there's been these strange attacks by elderly people who then later have no recollection of what they've done. And when they're talking about this, Rhys asks Marc if he thinks that there will be another attack tonight, which is precisely the case when we jump over to a guy by the name of Soldier just moments before their conversation, to where in his case we see that he's undergoing the most recent attack. But with this happening to Soldier, for one, it's messed up because it's a bunch of old people, but then on top of that, one of them is his mother. So for him, when he's cornered within the attack of the killer geriatrics, it's really one of those situations okay, well, what are you gonna do? And on top of that, when he asked them, why are you doing this? All of them at the same time were saying, because I want to sport for the hell of it. But regardless of the how or why this came about, there really wasn't much that Soldier could do except for just try to get away with his life. So from there, right after, when he shows up at the Midnight Mission, right in the middle of this conversation that we'd seen between Marc and Rhys, he's cut up pretty bad. And when he shows up, Rhys recognizes him okay, this is the guy that stays a block away with his mom and everyone calls him Soldier. And initially she's surprised that a bunch of old people did this to him. But with that being the case, what are you gonna do? Even if one of them wasn't his mom, you still can't beat up a bunch of old people, because you would have to be a monster to even play around with the idea of doing such a thing. But with Marc and Rhys talking to Soldier and getting him patched up, we do also get this moment to where Rhys, she starts to zone out with seeing all this blood, with her being new to being a vampire. So rather quickly for Rhys, Soldier starts to look like a snack, but she at least removes herself from the situation before completely losing control. But for Marc, from what he's gathered with everything that Soldier's told him, in addition to what him and Rhys have heard to this point, as far as all these attacks coming from the same building, to where now it's gotten a bit more personal in the case of Soldier, to where not only now does he have a first-hand victim, but also it was this guy's mother. So Marc lets him know he's not with the police and he's not gonna hurt his mother, but he does want to at least talk to her. And of course Soldier, he expresses he wants to come along because his mother's involved. But on their way back, they come across this janitor by the name of Holly, whose haircut alone raises suspicion. But as the two of them pass by and he tells Soldier and Marc, no problem sport, this immediately sets off a red flag for Marc. So when Soldier goes in looking for his mom, right away Marc is I don't want to talk to your mom anymore, we gotta go now. And Soldier's cool, and he tells Marc he's just gonna grab his gun before they go. But as soon as Marc turns around to go back in the hallway, he's surrounded by the same old people with all the knives and the hammers, and right away it's here where the janitor admits that this was all his doing. And so now with the way that the janitor was pulling this off, and it's by way of his sweat, because if someone ingests his sweat, then their minds are connected, which is how he's been able to control either the elderly or the infirm. But also in the case of this building and its tenants, he gained control over them by essentially sweating in the water supply, which is just nasty, filthy McNasty. But Marc figures out Holly's method pretty quick, and it's here where Holly tells him that the guy who put him up to this, to lure out Moon Knight and get him to fight all these old people and possibly kill them, but this mysterious guy who recruited him, he had pretty much just found this guy, gave him these instructions, because prior to this point, by his own means, he's just lacked the imagination to do something like this. And because of that, he accepted the assignment as a way to take on a new experience. And Marc asks Holly who is this guy, what is his name, as far as who set him up to do this, but all Holly tells him is that he was someone who's very interested in Moon Knight. But with Marc falling right into this, Holly then tells him how all this is going to play out, with this really being a situation to where someone's trying to force Marc into harming the people he's sworn to protect. And with him seeing the situation that he's in, he asks Holly what's keeping him from just tearing Holly's head off and ending this whole thing right away. But then Soldier steps out with his gun pointed at Marc's head, which then complicates Marc's plan rather quickly. But then it's here where Marc proposes the idea that he ingests Holly's sweat directly, no chaser. and not watered down like everyone else here has had, telling Howley that it's not that he lacks imagination, but rather he just hasn't had a challenge yet. And when this happens, like for one thing, Howley he quickly accepts, because he thinks that Moon Knight, or Mr. Knight, believes that he's just someone of strong will, who just has the willpower to resist any type of mind control. So Howley accepts, and he takes the crescent and he wipes it across his Jupiter-sized head, leaving it drenched with sweat that probably tastes like another planet that I'm not going to mention at this moment. But with him agreeing to do this, Howley believes that at the most, Mr. Knight is just a crazy guy. But if anything, Marc is far from crazy. And even though he's clinically said to have dissociative identity disorder, even that in itself is like an oversimplification. And Marc more or less tells him this as he takes a taste of his perspiration, because there's a good chance that Howley has experienced someone with dissociative identity disorder. And when Marc tells him that, I'm sure you've seen that before, but let me show you something new. And as soon as they're connected, Marc just pulls this guy in, and he gives this guy a first-hand look at pretty much what was recently teased when we had seen Marc's recent conversation with Dr. Sturman, with her talking about Marc's brain and how because he was in direct contact with Khonshu, the structure of his brain has fundamentally been changed. Because it's here as Marc uses this connection to just pull Howley into his mind, and right away Howley is just in very unfamiliar territory. And it's here where Marc tells him that what you are experiencing is truly alien, because the universe is composed almost entirely of darkness. It's the default state, an uncaring, indifferent nothing. Cold, impenetrable, and when early men looked up from the terrifying darkness of night and saw light, they worshipped it as a god. And it's here where Marc tells him that his light is the cold fire of the moon. It's the tidal pull on the salt blood beating through your heart. It's the silver madness that illuminates but does not warm. And he just tells this guy, come and worship. And really it's here with this happening, it's like a way of Jed MacKay showing us not only Marc Spector's current status, which like MacKay has mentioned before, this could be leading to another change, but it's also like a way of him clearing up some of the concept behind Marc leading the Midnight Mission. Because from his counseling sessions, you can tell that there's some parts of that he's still trying to figure out, but with us revisiting his mind in this moment, it really feels like Jed MacKay's doing a follow-up to Jeff Lemire's run. Because with Marc's initial interaction with Khonshu and his resurrection, beginning the process of altering his mind, that contact with the extraterrestrial intelligence, that was the beginning. But then for Marc, through a process of destruction and reconciliation with himself and his other selves, and that process has made his mind as it would be perceived to others as poisoned ground. But for Marc, this is what he's made of his mind. Because left to Khonshu, Marc's mind would have been considered fertile ground, but with it being considered poisoned and him solidifying his other personas as identities. But all in all, Marc's mind is what he's decided to make it as a result of being touched and altered by Khonshu. And we'll revisit that idea in just a little bit. But then it's here where Marc takes Howley, mummifies this guy, stuffs him in a sarcophagus and tucks him away. And when Marc does this, I want you to remember that he tells Howley, this is my temple. I take my weaknesses and I turn them into my advantage. I take my scars and I make them my weapons. And really that in itself is the simplest form of explaining Marc's mind and what it's become at this moment. But even with that said, we will revisit that idea in just a minute, or actually less than a minute. Well, with Marc doing this, everyone else is then let free, and he's just kind of like, nice, it's done, it's over. And he just leaves Howley's body foaming all over the floor that he had just cleaned up. Poetic justice. But then it's here where Marc goes back to the Midnight Mission, where he also finds that Rhys has come back. And it's here where, again, I want you to think of Rhys as a version of Marc, with her having a similar situation. Because here again, it seems like we're being shown like a demonstration of Marc's journey in relation to Khonshu by way of Rhys. And it's definitely not like a one-to-one demonstration with her being a vampire, but in this moment when he tells her that he very much understands what she's going through, with her being fundamentally changed and turned into something that she doesn't fully comprehend, because in her case, she has the pieces of Marc's experience, even though for her, they all come from different sources. But also with him talking to Rhys and telling her that he understands what she's going through, he gives her the same advice that he's been using himself as a solution. And he lets her know, though we may have been altered and turned into weapons, it is ultimately up to us to decide what we do with what has been done to us. We make our own decisions, because we understand the ways that we've been changed and that we've been broken. And he tells Rhys that that's what they use to destroy their enemies. And again, with Marc saying this is like the run through of the steps that he's taken, and more or less his passive but not so passive explanation of the changes that he's been through and how he's pulled his mind together, though not perfectly, but he's taken the pieces and made the best out of his situation. But with him giving this advice to Rhys, she thanks Marc for the input, but she also lets him know that he kind of lost her at the destroy our enemies part. But while they're having this conversation, we also see that just outside outside across the street on the rooftop that the left-handed Khonshu is watching. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below so we can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.